Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Gnomon live stream. I'm your host, Adam Hartel, and I'm really excited today for today's stream. This is another one of our Instructor Spotlights, so we're going to be highlighting one of the industry professionals who also teaches at Gnomon. Incidentally, the reel that you just watched, if you haven't seen it before, is the Gnomon campus, which is amazing in Hollywood. It's on a production lot, and we're super excited that with the start of this fall term, we now are fully back on campus for classes, and that is fantastic. We've got a huge incoming class for this fall term, and things are alive again out there. So we'd love to invite you also for a tour, and if you're interested in that, you can reach out to admissions. You can head to the Gnomon website. We are scheduling limited tours currently if you want to come out and see us. So today's stream is also available with closed captioning. If you're in need of that, you can head over to the Facebook platform and go to our page there and watch the Facebook live stream, and you can get your closed captioning if you're looking for that. And today's stream will also be available as video on demand after the stream is finished, for you to be able to go back, recommend to friends, etc., on both our Twitch and YouTube channels. So with that, I would like to share with you a bit about our guest. We're also going to play a really cool reel from the game that he is working with, and then we'll bring our guest on. So today's guest, Forrest Stephan, is the CG supervisor at Cloud Imperium Games, and for over 15 years, he has exercised his talents as a 3D artist into a prolific career as the current computer graphics supervisor for Cloud Imperium, currently working on the highly anticipated title Squadron 42. With versatility being the foundation for his skill set, Forrest has functioned across a variety of artistic disciplines, including characters, environments, shaders, visual effects, cinematics, and technical art. So with that, we are going to play a quick reel from Star Citizen, so you can see some of what Forrest has been working on, and then we'll bring our guest on to chat. So let's go ahead and roll that.
The criminal gang known as the Ninetails have launched an illegal blockade of one of the sector stations. Crusader Security is calling upon any trained security professionals in the area to assist. Stand by for further announcements.
That was extremely cool. So would you guys please welcome Forrest to the stream with me as we bring his camera up. Hello, sir. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome. I just got to say that that reel was awesome.
Pretty hype, right?
Yeah, it's really cool. You know, I'm watching that going like I can live out my childhood fantasies of like literally existing in a universe like that.
Yeah, I mean, flying it, and I actually have, you know, I've been actually playing with my friends just to show them flying into Orison, Cloud City, essentially. It's just
yeah, it's totally getting Cloud City vibes.
yeah. I mean, it's the first. Cool. first like gas cloud planet, I suppose. You know, so pretty amazing what everyone was able to do to create that, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. We're gonna talk about a few things in the conversation, and a bit later we'll talk, about your role at Gnomon, what it's like to be in the classroom with you. But I wanted to start out by just learning a little bit about you. Can you tell us, obviously, without having to, go into every detail, can you tell us a little bit about your journey as an artist? How did you know that what you're doing now is what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I actually got started at a pretty early age. I was lucky enough to have a computer at the household at basically, and as soon as I could stand almost, like Commodore 64, then like Windows, probably a little older than I look, and so I was always very fortunate to have that. And I just started modding games at a very early age. When Doom came out, started modding Doom, and I told my parents when I was like 16 years old that I'm going to make video games, and they're just like, "That's not even a real thing. What are you talking about?"
That's awesome. See, you were one of those kids that was like, "This is what I want to do," and your parents were like, "No, that's not a real job." And you're the one that proved them wrong.
Yeah, they're just
that's
like,
amazing.
Well, luckily it turned out to be a real job,
right? But you were kind of an outlier at 16 years old.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a black sheep thing to say you're going to do.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you on the Commodore 64, and even some of those early text adventure games where you didn't have a lot of visualization; it was just all imagination.
Yeah,
really cool stuff.
It was cool. Like my dad was like, we'll get these like games for you, but you have to actually know how to put in the graphics card yourself, upgrade the computer. So like I had the luxury of having, the parts I needed to play these PC games, but my dad made me have to figure it out. So
that's awesome though.
Yeah.
No, I had a nerd dad who was like one of the early adopters bringing systems into the house, and it was very similar kind of situations. Like, you want to do this, you're going to learn how to do it yourself. Yep.
Yeah, and awesome. I got a Doom disc, and they had a level editor on there, and I played through the shareware, then just started making my own levels, and before you know it,
so cool.
Here I am.
Yeah, no, excellent. So tell us a little bit of, so you're 16 years old, you're like, this is what I want to do, and you just started doing it, before it was like a thing that you could study at school and, that kind of stuff. So tell us a little bit of how you got from, aspirational 16-year-old to starting your career in the industry.
Well, so through my teenage years, you start learning more about 3D, and obviously Doom went from 2D to 3D, and you eventually learn, okay, I need to learn a 3D program. So I learned 3ds Max. You need to learn a 2D program. So you learn Photoshop. And your goal back then was, there was something about just like a 2-year experience thing. It was like, I felt like if I could get 2 years experience using the software, then people would take me seriously and give me a job. And so my goal was to go anywhere I could that would let me use these programs that I knew were in the gaming industry and the film industry, and how do I just get that experience. And I was lucky enough to get hired for an architecture firm and a general contractor to do 3D renderings, because back then that was a very kind of niche thing, and they didn't know a lot about it. They knew they wanted to do it and be able to visualize their buildings, especially the company I ended up getting hired for was a design build, which means that everything is custom. So being able to see what the result is so beneficial to the owners. And I got lucky enough at a very early age to get hired as a 3D renderer. That wasn't really a thing yet, just let's see if this works. And then ended up learning Revit and being able to export out to 3ds Max, which was my choice because I didn't know what they were doing. So I was like, yes, I got my program. So I started getting the experience, and I was rendering out in Mental Ray out of 3ds Max. And that was back before V-Ray, and you could just throw all these samples at it. And then Photoshop. And then after that, I did that for 2 years. Then I moved on to my next job, which was for, it was called Total Immersion Software, now called Antific, but they just did like simulation type real-time graphics. I remember it was back with like Gamebryo, and I only knew how to use that because I was modding Oblivion, which I should probably note, my whole career, the success is 100% due to modding. If there wasn't modding, Crysis, Far Cry, Oblivion, all these games, Doom, like that's what really made my career was just always modding the whole time and making things the whole time,
Yeah.
no matter what.
Well, and it was I think the 90s were such a cool time for modding too.
Yeah.
Because it was for the people that didn't know how to do it, it was so accessible. And I remember, like, I'd play through a game like Jedi Fallen Order or something like that. And then you love the game, then you go on the forums and you go on the bulletin boards and you find people that I modded it out to be like this, or I added this character skin. And yeah, no, it was such a good time for that. I mean, it still is, but I think it feels like that was the time that it all just sort of like really turned into a community.
Yeah, and we had like Ventrilo servers, and we were all over the world, So like even this like pandemic work from home thing, I was actually kind of like I was already prepared for it just from my modding days of having to work with people all over just on a Ventrilo server all hours, So
yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit then about, and you started with sort of like early ArcViz, right? Like maybe even before that was a prolific
so
thing.
basically environment art, and then how do you use mental ray to render it to make it look nice,
Yeah, awesome. So tell us a little bit about your role or roles that you've been in the games pipeline. And then maybe we could also sort of dovetail that with, if you could tell us a little bit about what roles are there, maybe for artists who are like, I want to work in games, but I don't know what role relates to me the best, and what I like to do.
Yeah, I mean, I essentially got started as an environment artist, and that was just kind of the role that I was thrown into, with just trying to get the experience, in which my first like real time engine job, the one after the architecture, that allowed me to, basically be an environment artist right off the bat. And then I was able to, then once you start doing the environment art, you're like, how do I make things more efficient? How do I make things better? How do I make my job easier? Because it wasn't like this massive studio. You start getting into tech art, and then tech art starts solving your problems. Then you start kind of going into tech art and being an environment artist. And then eventually, it just led to learning. My learning process is like a need to know. Like if I need to learn it, then I'll learn it. If I have to do particles, I'll learn how to do particles. If I have to do environments, I'll learn how to do environments. It's just have the fundamentals. There's lots of different disciplines. However, the downside of that is if you're not sticking with one, you're never going to kind of become a mastery of one, or it'll take a very long time. So, but there's a lot of different categories. There was, environment art was the obvious one. Tech art is a great one. I mean, that's where you really start solving people's problems, and just making their life easier. It's a supportive role. And there's lots of different ranges, like everything from rigging a character and building tools for that to how do you batch out textures and materials. And among, so many different even categories into that. And then obviously you have a particle artist, and then you have cinematic artists, you have props artists, weapons artists, character artists, all kind of segregated disciplines that you could work in.
Yeah, and I think I talk with a lot of college students and high school students who are like, I want to work in games. I like making art and I like making things in 3D. But typically what gets blasted out there is like you pick up the art of this game, and it's like concept art for the most part. And so people are looking, I go, should I be a concept artist? But I like doing this. And I think, the idea of a character artist is different than, for instance, being a character designer. Can you tell us a little bit about, and I should set it up by saying this. Sometimes there's a stigma of like, well, if I'm not doing the concept work, or if I'm not painting or drawing, then I'm just doing 3D stuff and it's not creative, or it's just going to be super, super technical. But obviously you got into this at a very early age and it was very inspiring. So can you talk to us a little bit about that, post, 2D art or conceptual art side of the pipeline? What is it like to be an artist in the part of the pipeline that you're in?
Well, I think there's always creativity elements, because honestly, a lot of like what designing a character is, you're trying to get the idea out, right? It's all about the read. Like, can I read what's happening? Do I understand what's happening? And a lot of it's kind of photo bash or kit bash to some degree. So from an artist, you need to be able to take that concept and interpret it. Like,
Yeah.
what is the actual materials in this concept that the concept artist was trying to convey? What do I need to do to work with tech artists that have to rig this character to make it compatible with the game, right? And the tools that you currently have. You know, a concept artist might do something that may not work with the current tech that the engine provides, and that's kind of the character artist to be able to be like, creatively work with a concept in a way that makes it usable in the actual game, which is an important role. And of course, would also be supported by tech artists that kind of also know the kind of lower end side of the tools, but a lot of creative element there. And some, if you're, you know, if you're lucky enough, you have the opportunity to work with them, right? You can kind of work together, and a concept artist can ask a character artist for, you know, feedback, and, you know, vice versa, and really start nailing down designs and stuff, you know.
Yeah, and it, you know, I'm more, my experience, I'm more on the concept side, but, you know, I do a lot of stuff that's adjacent to character art. And I think what seems really cool about whether you're a character artist, a prop artist, an environment artist, you're kind of taking it from a design and you're making it real. Like you're literally making it for the game, and that's what the audience is going to interact with.
Yeah, you're creating the final product essentially, you know, because it, you know, whether it's ZBrush or in Photoshop, what ultimately matters is what you see in the final screen when you're actually playing the game. So it's your job essentially to be like, okay, let me take this amazing thing and be able to successfully implement it as close as possible in the actual game, which requires problem solving, it requires artistic ability, it requires creativity. There, you know, there's a lot of elements that, you know, to really do it well.
Yeah, and all those tools are, you know, have come a long way since the 90s and modding. And those tools are getting more and more intuitive and capable of doing more. And, you know, the resolution that we're working with in games, now you're actually like really rendering real physical materials, you know, that are interacting with light. So it's like it's like the old days of when people were fabricating set pieces and, you know, sculpting out pieces of a suit or something like that. You're making it real, but just on a virtual level.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you're definitely modeling everything out now. You know, you have a lot of like, there's the silhouettes are looking a lot better because you have way more polys to actually, you know, handle stuff. In the class that, you know, I teach, we're using Unreal Engine. And of course, in Unreal Engine, you know, we've all seen the Unreal 5 demos where they're just like throwing all of these, you know, triangles and stuff like that. But there's also, again, you have to kind of lean on the technical side because you have to know when you can use what poly counts, what's, you know, is to be a good even character artist, having a technical foundation of performance and how to work within the scope of what you can do for your target hardware is a great thing to also.
Yeah, just because you can throw like a million polys at a character in Unreal 5, it doesn't mean that you don't have to take into consideration what the rigger's got to do and what the animator's got to do.
Yeah, there's a sweet spot, right? It's just like if you save your texture too big and then it's going to get compressed and not look that great. If you would have saved it at the right resolution with the right compression, it probably would have looked better than something that may have been twice the size, right? So it's all about finding that sweet spot and just understanding the different elements so you can fit right in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned it. Let's talk a little bit, and I apologize for the plane that's passing overhead. I'll mute my mic while you talk. But let's talk a little bit about what you're teaching at Gnomon. So if you can kind of talk to us about what, if somebody comes in is in class with you, Gnomon, what they would be learning from you. And then maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you design your classroom experience for conveying that knowledge.
Yeah, so the class is, you know, a little interesting in the fashion that a lot of times, you know, our wonderful IT support comes in and asks me, would you like a tablet? And then a lot of times I'm like, no, even though it's a texturing class, which is kind of confusing. So a lot of what I teach is it uses Substance Designer, it uses Substance Painter, and it uses Unreal. And essentially what you're doing is you're building a material pipeline and good materials. Like that's the kind of idea of it. Like, how do you build something scalable? It's not just, can I make the best leather or can I find a good leather? It's how do you get the leather approved as quick as possible? How do you iterate on the leather as quick as possible? If you have 1,000 assets that need to use leather, how do you propagate that change across 1,000 assets? So a lot of what I teach is much more real world production, material and texture art creation.
Yeah. Well, and you're bringing up a really good point, and that is one of the things I wanted to ask you about. You know, at Gnomon, every instructor is like you, a working industry artist. So you're teaching in parallel to day to day actually doing the work in the industry. Um, from the perspective of someone in a studio looking at junior artists come in, why would you say, you know, to prospective students, why would it be so important to learn from someone who's literally doing the work as they're teaching it?
You know, I would say in general, I know from my own experience, you know, I didn't have a clue of a lot of what was important before I got into the role and
Mm-hmm.
learned from the people around me. You know, when I was doing art, I wasn't thinking about things like draw calls. I was just trying to make the art, you know, the best possible. I wasn't thinking things like, what's my frame rate? How many milliseconds does this cost if I put it into the game, you know? And the fact of the matter is, if you want the best thing possible, you need to work with all of these elements. And so once I got into the actual industry, there was a real rude awakening of, oh, you have to make this work, and there's requirements to make this work, and what are these requirements? And oh no, like we don't have time to do this or that. Like, how do we save time? And everything was just, I worked in my own box, you know, like with my own art. And then all of a sudden there's thousands of, you know, other assets that are being generated by hundreds of other people. And now you might have to interface with them and stuff like that. It really is you know, you're in a team now, right?
Yeah.
And you need to, if you create a material like gold, you shouldn't be, if that's not just for you, potentially, that could be for 200 other people. And then you throw an art director on top of there that might have their own opinion on what gold is. If you have 200 people making gold, it's all going to look different. Good luck, art director, right? So it was just there was a lot of rude awakenings when I got in there, and a lot of what I try to teach is just, you know, not to scare people from all that stuff, but how to be prepared for it. How to, like, when you create materials and textures, how to build them in a way that's scalable, can quickly be iterated on, and you can get quick approvals. Because let's face it, that the name of the game when you actually get into the industry is approvals. Like, that's
Right.
if you're a commercial production artist, like, you want to get things approved. That's
Yeah.
the whole name of the game.
Otherwise, you're holding up the pipeline.
Yeah,
If
I
you
mean,
can't get it approved.
and if you're a freelancer, you know, obviously the faster you can get things approved, the more money you're going to make, and it's just, you know, it's good for everybody, you know. So you want to be able to be flexible. I have an art director walks over my shoulder, or like somebody, I want to be able to be, they're like, I don't like that green, I don't want to have to open substance, go back in there, change it, come back. I'm just like, hold on, don't move. And then I have a slider and I move, slightly adjust it, and they're like, that's the green I want. And then I'm like, okay, cool, bye. You know, and then I don't have to wait for a day turnaround to get approved, you know, just like that.
Working smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
And that's
exactly.
No, I 100% agree. That's really what makes the difference. And I think you're making a great point as well. For, I think there's a lot of younger artists that, like, you know, in, you know, the 21st century, kind of doing the version of what you were doing when you were 16 is they're out there and they're modeling assets, and they're texturing them, and they're preparing them, you know, to go on a site in a marketplace, to be used in VR, to be used in Unreal Engine. And I think that's amazing, and people should keep doing that, because if you're in high school and you're doing that kind of stuff, you're building a fantastic portfolio. But I think the other side of it that you're bringing into the mix is, you know, working within your box and really developing what you're passionate about, but then also reaching outside of that and figuring out what's the stuff that I need to be really good at to benefit everybody else around me in the team.
Including the client, right? Like, you may like the way a gold looks, but the client might not. And it's really about the client. So if you, you know, if you're in Substance Painter and you're painting a gold, and all of a sudden the client's like, I don't like that gold. And you're like, well, that's the gold that's in Substance Painter. What do you do? Right. So I'm like, go back in Substance Designer, get the feedback from whoever wants a certain type of gold, make that gold, bring that into Painter, or modify the existing one that's in Painter. So how to actually give people the fundamental background of skill sets that they would actually need in a real world environment, should they choose to pursue that discipline.
Yeah, 100%. You're making a really good point too. It's something that comes up a lot in the conversations that I have, is people will talk about, like, well, what software should I learn? It'll be very software related questions. Like, what's the one that if I just learn this one software,
that's like
I
lenses.
can get a job? Yeah, it's like lenses.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, there's the person that, one of the things we do at Gnomon, which you're doing in your class, is we're not just saying this is how to use Substance and what button to push in Substance to get gold. You're teaching basically the fundamentals of designing substances. And Substance Painter is the tool you're using, but you can make any gold you want
And
with
just
that tool.
well, the fundamentals of just, they're getting even more fundamentals. You get the fundamentals of how PBR works. Like, what actually are you doing, and when are you doing something that could be causing a rendering issue, or an issue for like lighting artists or something. Like, what is the fundamental, like, this is the way a graphics engineer designed it. Let's, follow those rules, and you're gonna just trust it. You get the best results, kind of thing. So how to actually follow the PBR rules is, obviously super important.
Yeah. And that really is that's the answer to the
The
question, what you
fundamentals
said. Yes, because you can do cool stuff with the software. Anybody can push a button in a software if you learn how to push the buttons and make cool stuff appear. But to change it, to edit it, to understand how to mold it into precisely the product that it needs to be, that's where all this other stuff comes into play.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're learning things like when you're a substance designer, you're learning how to like interpolate between multiple materials, which is actually how you can do like metal composites, right? Then you're going into Unreal and also, interpolating between things. You're kind of learning like some different, obviously that's a very broad a function that you could do, but in general, people are learning these fundamentals even of core programming that they don't even realize that they're learning, that actually they're kind of doing in Photoshop every day. So they're also learning how, like, if you learn a technique in Substance Designer, you can actually use that same technique in Unreal Engine in their material editor. So it's, like the same way they learn the fundamentals of how to hard surface model, they're actually learning the fundamentals of like nodes and how to actually build material systems in multiple programs. So it's almost like a tech art fundamental kind of that, you teach.
Well, and it's like any other art form. There's stuff that you have to learn that might not seem as exciting as other things you're doing with that. But if you learn those things, you can do so many more exciting things with it.
Yeah. And it'll save you time in the long run. I teach like, build your material library and then apply your material library. Don't like build gold every single time you build an asset with gold,
Yes. And I'm seeing a little bit of activity in the chat. I'll encourage you guys in just a little bit. We're going to take some questions from the chat. And my colleague, Xander, who is also a Gnomon admissions advisor, is in the chat to answer Gnomon-related questions. But if you've got questions for Forrest, feel free to start typing them in. In a few moments, we'll get to those, and I'll be able to bring those up. But another question I wanted to ask, and this is probably a little bit more of a mundane type of a question for you, but I do find that this is something that a lot of people that are looking at a school like Gnomon are very interested to know. Can you tell us, like, what's the timeline of an average class with you? Like, what are the components of the, what you're doing in a class, whether that's, review, critique, demonstrations? How does that work?
So generally in the very beginning, I'll just start talking, I kind of will just start showing something like, for example, like, here's how you use a tool set, right? So it's almost more of like a lecture of how to do something. But then immediately following that, it would be like, depending on the complexity of it, I would stop and then be like, okay, perhaps let's try it together. Obviously when you're in the classroom, that's a lot easier to do. One of the advantages of being in the classroom. So then everyone could like try it. And then you go right back to it, and then you kind of discuss it again, and then you give them a little bit more. So it's a constant, like, teach something, give it a try. Teach something, give it a try. You've come this far, and then it's the end of class. I'm like, all right, everybody go home and try it like 10 more times, right? Until you've got that connection of how to do it. And that's the other thing. It's just like you learn, but then you have to like repeat to really make sure that knowledge sticks. And then you learn, and then you repeat, and you learn, and you repeat. And that's kind of the way that, learn and fail, essentially. And then all of a sudden you've succeeded, and you're like, what happened? I thought I failed 10 times, right?
Yeah, fail as quickly as you can. And so you're giving them those opportunities to do that while they're in the room with you, so that when they are hitting a wall, they can ask you, how do I get through this? How do I do this better?
It's like if you're playing a guitar, like the first time you pick it up, you ain't gonna like be shredding, right? You got to put in the time, learn things, put in the time, learn things, put the same time.
Absolutely. So let's see, we've got a few questions that are starting to come into the chat. So I think I'll start peppering some of those in here. One of the questions is when texturing and adding details, do you have any tips to know when not to add too many details and making the object too dirty? So it sounds like you got your texture in there and they're wanting to add like that extra plus that makes it feel more realistic. How do you find that balance?
I just stick with, I use rules for everything. I make
Mhm.
my big shapes, do my silhouettes, then I make medium shapes, and I make small shapes, and I make micro shapes. And
Mhm.
I do 4 sets of shapes on everything that I do. I just keep it super simple. Let's take an example of a dirt, right? The big shape's the mound, and
Mhm.
then maybe the second shape is cutting out the mound. The third shape is like the sand or dirt and stuff like that. Then maybe the fourth shape is like some like pebbles or rocks that's on top of everything, right? So no matter what it is, whether it's a spaceship or a piece of dirt, I always just use 4 levels of detail.
Mhm. Well, and that totally that's just art fundamentals too. That's big, medium, small,
Yep. No matter what it is,
primary, secondary reads.
I
Yeah,
just do 4
absolutely.
passes at everything,
Mhm.
essentially.
Yeah, very cool. And then thinking of, I think one of the things that's great is you had this, you were so early on in the game, no pun intended, that you were very self-taught and you're needing to go out and find those resources
Yeah.
yourself. And like the way that you said, you're kind of working within your own box, and then eventually you learn how to bust out of that and start developing those extra skill sets. So you've had a very and it's always going to be a grind. There's always going to be this constant learning, this constant pushing, just like the guitar analogy used. But thinking in terms of, maybe high school or college age students that are out there right now, and they are doing their own stuff, and they are modeling and texturing and shading and that kind of stuff, and they're figuring it out on their own. Um, is there any advice that you'd like to share with younger artists to help them maybe avoid some pitfalls that you fell into as you were working on it?
Yeah, I think obviously, I would say like the biggest thing that you could do is learn how to like schedule your time.
Mm,
As strange as that sounds, like there was 2 things that I wish I would have done more when I was, if I knew, I would have exercised more to keep my body and my mind in shape. Because
hmm.
you got to remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Like it
Yeah.
always is so easy to seem like it's always a sprint, but that also comes down to scheduling, and that's another thing that I wish I would have known at an early age. You always like me specifically, and I'm sure this is very common with artists. Like your eyes are so much bigger than your stomach, so to speak, right? And you just want to do so much. And I'm always just like, that's like, what if you actually scope that out? If you
Yeah.
want to do all of this and you broke that down in how many materials, how many models, budgeted how much time you're going to spend, I guarantee you, you are far beyond how much time that you've allotted yourself. So
Hmm.
if you can start putting those numbers to what you do and be your own producer, you're going to save yourself from being burnt out. You're going to save yourself from so many things, and you're going to hit your deadlines more. And that's the first thing that I kind of teach the students. Like also like midway through the course, it's like they have their finals and I'm like, scope it out. Like, how much do you have left? How much
Hmm.
time is there? And then they're like, I think there's too much. I don't have enough time. And I'm like, that's fine. That's okay. What's important is you discover that. Now all you have to do is just pull that camera in. Like, just keep pulling that camera in until there's
Hmm.
only so many things on that screen and you have time for it, And
Yeah.
that's the other thing is I feel like people a lot of times try to do too much. It's just like, just put something simple on your desk, get a camera, take a photo of it, and see if you can make it and make it look just
Yeah.
like it. If you can't make it just like it, why are you modeling this whole environment? Try to like master something small and make it look
Yeah.
real. And then make sure your materials are reacting right with the lighting, like how they are in real life, like simple, make it good. And then once you do that, you can start building more and more, because you shouldn't be expected to build these whole environments, that teams do that, right? So it's better to like work smaller, perfect quality. Okay,
Yeah.
you know how to do it. I want another 100 of you. You know what I mean? That can
Yes.
all do this, and then you can have a whole environment, and it's going to look
Hmm.
stunning.
You're bringing up so many good things right now. One of them is it's similar advice that Bo Jansen gave on a stream we did a while back, our VFX lead, and it was like, if you're gonna make something, don't like out the gate go try to make a Game of Thrones dragon. Make something simple, like a pair of scissors, or some,
Or
like you said,
can you
something
make
on
a
your desk.
dragon's tooth?
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
make that, if you can make a dragon's tooth look stunning, and then move on, right?
Right.
Like,
Well, and I think in the age of social media, and we see all this stuff on ArtStation that's amazing. Everybody feels like they have to make some be all end all project. But at the end of the day, the art director or recruiter that's going to hire you in a studio is not necessarily one of your Instagram followers. They're looking for a specific skill set, and you can execute that skill set at a simple level. And what I'm hearing from you is sometimes it's more helpful to see somebody execute something like that than throw a bunch of things at some big thing.
I'm generally not like looking for how fast somebody is. I mean, that's definitely important, but I'm definitely looking at, can they do it or not, right? Because I feel like how long things take will come with practice and time. Like the more that you do it, the faster you're going to get at it. So what's important is you have like the correct build, you know what you're doing, and then just over time your skill set gets faster, as opposed to like, you know, not doing it correctly, or for whatever reason, maybe, you know, you're not quite sure how to lighting, so your materials are always off, or you're not quite sure about how topology reacts with lighting, reacts with normals and all this stuff. And then you can never quite get it to look right. Then you have a whole scene that is not quite right, you know? And then you're kind of repeating in your brain, like kind of bad habits or whatever. So it's just like smaller, get feedback, know what you're doing, and then let the natural evolution of getting better take its place by just doing it.
I know I've fallen into the same trap myself, where I'm like, I really want to make a cool thing, and it's like I took so long making this big thing, and I could have learned so much faster if I just like done this iterative kind of execution like you're describing. Let's see, we've got another question in the chat. Let's see. Would you consider Mari over Substance, or is it just a matter of fundamentals, irrespective of the software?
Depends how much you like a magic wand tool. I'm just kidding. I'm sure if somebody's watching this, they'll get that joke.
Somebody out there is laughing.
Somebody's laughing. I think that they have different things that they can do, right? Like Mari obviously has like superior, like per pixel, like control, like marquee tools, and just like for VFX, when you really need everything to be perfect, you know, Mari still is better at that. Also, you know, you could have like a million UDIMs or whatever. In Substance, you know, I think they both are like memory hogs, and they both take a ton of performance to get running. But I think Substance is a little bit like, the iterative feedback is a little worse in Substance. But I also think it's more powerful in the fact that just like how great it looks in the viewport. Like you can literally match your viewport with like the Unreal viewport, right? Like, which is so powerful. But the thing about it's really like, am I traditionally hand painting? And do I have like engineers? Mari, sure. Am I kind of just making something that's maybe not quite so hand painted, you know? And it's just like I'm making like an armor set or something like that. Like you can build materials in Substance Painter. You could build like systems in Substance Painter that allows you to have so much more control. So, you know, it's a hard question to say. Like if you're just painting, sure, maybe Mari is better. If you're trying to build systems and make things like really, you know, fluid and functional and iterative and shareable and all that stuff, Substance Painter is going to win every time, just because of Substance Designer on the back end.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. We've also got and we always get one because it's very popular software. I use it myself. It has its place. But someone's asking if you think that Blender will ever have a place in the gaming industry, like some of the more standard software. And maybe I'll also attach to that question, you know, Blender's free and a lot of people are learning on it. So what do you see is the current value of Blender in the community right now?
I had to see who actually asked that question, because I actually switched from 3D Max to Blender 2 years ago. So I use Blender full time. Now, I mean, in a production studio, you generally have like Max and Maya that you still, you know, people use because you have custom tools for the exporting and how you're going to package the data in the data that's exported, right? That's usually quite important for a company to have that control. But in regards to all my modeling and everything, I do it all. I model now fully in Blender. When they came out with the 2.8, that was kind of like the game changer for me. I wasn't a huge fan of Blender previously. I thought that the UI and everything was a little not quite there yet and all that stuff. And I was still 100% 3ds Max. But then when the 2.79 and 2.8 version came out, and I tried it, and I was just like, they've done such a good job. And I just, all of the, like the scripts that people make, like on Blender Market and all these things are just like, these Python things people make are so great. And so I'm full Blender now. So
wow, okay, cool.
I think that there's definitely a place for it. I think the difficulty you're going to get is adopting tools to use Blender as part of your pipeline. That's really the thing. You know, can studios adopt Blender in a way that they'll actually write their own exporters in Blender? That way they can get into their package. That would be the real question, which is per studio. If I had my own studio, I'd just make it a Blender house. I'm totally okay with it. I think it's a great program.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've heard that a lot of that is more infrastructure, right? Like really big studios that already have this whole infrastructure built around a different software. That sometimes is the harder thing to transition. But
that said, it's still like what I'm saying. Like it's still like kind of a lens. Like there's different like preferences and stuff. But like you throw me, you know, as long as you have the fundamentals, like bridging, beveling, it's really just a matter of like. Where's that shortcut key? Does anyone know? You know, like if you throw me in Maya, if you throw me in Max, if you throw me in Blender, it's all, I'm going to do everything pretty much the same. It's just a matter of what shortcuts I use per program, you know, whether that's scripts or actual keys and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I know that like it's always really cool when you hear an industry artist saying that they're using Blender, because I know that there's a bunch of Blender people out there rejoicing right now.
It's free too.
It's totally free. Well, I learned 3D with Blender. And again, you're making the great point of it's not about what's the one software I need to learn that's going to make me a monster. It's like just learn 3D modeling. Just learn the principles of 3D modeling. You know, whether you're doing that in Blender, whether you're learning in Maya, whatever, it's like if you know how to do that stuff, like you put it, and then it's just a matter of understanding how to do the same thing in a different software with a different shortcut.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, you know, obviously if you're applying to studios, like learn the software that they know, because the studio's not going to want to have to teach you Maya, you know what I mean, if you're a Blender user. But also it's a conversation to have, like, okay, you're a Maya studio, but like, can I use Blender, and why are you a Maya studio? Is there certain tools? Like, you know, you might have a situation where like for example, I would model everything in Blender, but then I would bring it into like 3ds Max to actually do the export or whatever, and stuff like that. So
yeah, I talk with one of our directors of education, Max Dayan, about this all the time. Is it's like you learn the software that the industry is using, but learn the fundamentals that transcend the software.
That's what matters.
So that I think when you go to a studio and suddenly throw a different software at you, and the artist doesn't cave or be like, I can't use it, I can't do anything now, there's a confidence that exudes as well, because it's like, oh, this is just a different tool, but I know how to make a 3D model. I know how to texture and shade it.
There's only so many things you do when you're modeling. Like if you like, you know, like recorded yourself modeling, you probably use like 10 different like actions, like pretty much the majority of the time. So know what you do. And then if you have to go into another program, the first thing but again, that's my process, need to know, right? It's just like, I don't need to know a whole 3D program. Just what do I use to model? Those are the 10 things I use. You know, I maybe have them on my own. Maybe I write my own little thing where they're accessible, or maybe somebody else has already written scripts to make it even easier, tool shelf, stuff like that. You go to another program. Okay, where's my bridge? Where's my bevel? How do I chamfer? How do, you know, like just look for the same things, figure out how to do it. And it's just like same thing. If you're a substance designer, you go into Unreal Engine. Okay, I want to blend this and this. How do I do that between one and the other? It's more just understanding the term. And even when you're teaching PBR, like there's so many different terms for the whole thing. Base color, diffuse, albedo. It's like know the fundamentals so you could talk the language no matter what people are speaking and be able to be in any program. If you throw me into Unity, throw me into Unreal, throw me into Arnold, RenderMan, I'm going to feel comfortable with the material and rendering system because I know the fundamentals and I know what the differences are, which the fundamentals provide that knowledge.
Yeah, and it's not like you have to go become an expert in all the softwares. It's what you just said. It's like you learn, just like any art fundamental. Learn the principles behind it.
Doesn't matter what guitar you're given.
I love the analogy because I'm also a guitar player, but it's true. Yeah, I mean, I learned how to play guitar on a basement, you know, horrible shape. You know, somebody's inherited guitar that was in terrible shape, but I learned on it, and then I can play a nicer guitar. Let's see here. Oh, in case you didn't see it in the chat, it was a Mayor Hazen, I believe I'm pronouncing the name, asking the Blender related question.
That's great. So I use it.
Very cool. All right, another question that came in. I think you touched on it very briefly earlier, but someone's just wanting to know, what are the different software that you use in your classroom at Gnomon?
We use Substance Painter, Substance Designer, and Unreal Engine. Those are the three primary software that we'll be using.
Okay. And then another software-related question, I want to know if Cloud Imperium uses Maya in Studio.
Yes, Maya and 3ds Max.
Okay, gotcha. All right, cool. All right, well, we're coming into the home stretch, so any last-minute questions you guys have, please get them in. But in the meantime, I want to pose a question to you, Forrest, that I ask of all of our guests. And I know you've already given a lot of advice. You've talked about what you wish you had learned earlier. But if you could visualize kind of a high school student or college student who's out there, maybe they're using Blender a lot or a similar software. They're learning these things. What advice would you have for a younger artist who is this? Let's say that they're aspiring to do exactly what you're doing today. What would you speak to a person in that situation?
I would say follow what you're interested in, like start trying to figure out, like, do I like particles? Do I like cinematics? Do I like modeling? Do I like lighting? Do I like the way that models reflect with lighting? Like, I think most people kind of start as a generalist to some degree, like most educations, but I think, go towards what you're passionate about, because that's where you're going to spend the most time at. And it's all about putting in the time. Whatever you're willing to put in the time with is what you'll be successful. But once again, the people that are going to get pretty good are going to be putting in a lot of time. So then you have to start counterbalancing a lot of time with being able to schedule your time properly. So that's kind of, that whole thing will really help you out.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk a little bit more about those soft skills, because that's something that you're kind of forced to learn the soft skills when you're at Gnomon, because like you talked about, you're going to hit that point of overwhelm, and it's like, guess what? We need to learn time management now. For someone who's like, I want to work at Cloud Imperium. I want to do texturing and shading at Cloud Imperium. I want to do modeling. Tell us about some of kind of the real world soft skills that are kind of like, you're going to need to be able to do these things in order to work in a studio.
I think first and foremost is, like, you got to really know how to model. So if you spend all your time in ZBrush, you're going to be kind of like, in trouble when it comes to the modeling a little bit, maybe. But I think, hopefully most people that are learning ZBrush also are spending a lot of time modeling and stuff like that. So not that, ZBrush can't do pretty good. I think the auto topology stuff is getting better and better, but a lot of, like, especially Star Citizen is so hand modeled. I think for me, it's just like, understand what like normals are, whether you're doing normal maps or you're understanding normal or vert normals, like just understand the way that a surface reacts to lighting. I feel like that a lot of time that's overlooked in a modeler's approach. Like, kind of understand what's going on, and really critique your model in the lighting before you even start just like tossing textures and stuff on there. Like, does it look good when it's just a plain PBR material with like very little diffuse or albedo information? How does the model react to the lighting? And make sure that the model should look great before you even start texturing it. And that's kind of what I would say is, like, we have our artists are just modeling champions. They're so good. So I would definitely say that would be my suggestion, is really understand what's going on.
Absolutely. And then we've had a couple more questions come in. Someone's wanting to know if you have a recommendation for a tool to use to create vegetation.
Yeah, speed tree.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I had a student one time that had this really amazing, like, because what I try to say is, like, focus on a core object. That's what you're doing for the class. Now, also present your artwork. And I think that's another thing that's really important. Actually, that's a good topic that I just want to really briefly touch on, is like, present your stuff well, right? Don't like give somebody something that you've like kind of cropped it, or like that doesn't look great. Like, it's all about getting the approval. And there's times that you can have an asset that may be better than another asset, but if that other asset is presented better, that might have a higher chance of getting approval than the one that may not be as good, right? And it's all about presentation, because don't forget, you're actually selling your art, so to speak, to somebody, to be like, I want that. And so you have to always present, no matter, just get in a habit. And whenever you're giving anybody anything that you're working on, a friend, screen grab or whatever, but for the most part, like, always have your work presentable. When I'm working on an asset at all times, the first thing I do is I drop in a helper. I have a camera set up, and then I replace that helper with an object, and then the whole time that I'm working, it's presentable. And so that to me is really important. So to go to the point of what foliage to use, this person had like a really amazing kind of like a Stonehenge type thing. It was basically all broken out stone and all this stuff. But by itself, it was just like broken out stone, right? He did a great job on it, but I was like, you know, he's like, what do I do for the rest of it? And I was like, just learn speed tree, like use the middleware, just put trees all around the thing, drop in like an auto sky that already exists, download some Megascan assets, put some rocks in there. And this thing went from like, you know, just kind of a normal looking, you know, asset that almost looked like it would be on Turbo Squid to like this stunning art piece, just because they put in that extra work. And so I'm always trying to say, focus on like your thing, but then understand all of these middlewares that are supportive and feel free to utilize those, you know, like if you're doing a barrel for the class, you don't have to worry about that brick wall in the background. Go on Substance Source, go on Megascans, grab it, put it in the background. Your barrel is what needs to be in focus anyways. And then just like blur out that background. You don't need to worry about it, and just utilize what's there so you could focus. Because it's, and I also say it's good. Like if you can be like, here's my art piece. Oh, how'd you do the trees? Oh, you use speed tree. Oh, you know speed tree? You know, like it's, these are all good things, you know?
Yep. Absolutely. And again, you're pushing art fundamentals. It's like you could be an amazing modeler, but if you know how to art direct your presentation, if you understand composition when it comes to lighting, and absolutely.
No matter what you do, learn lighting, learn composition, learn cameras. No matter what you do.
Yeah, I've heard it said so many times, like you can have an awesome model, but if it doesn't have good lighting on it, if you know if it's not composed well on the scene, it's like you're killing all that work you put into it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, if you're gonna like do this painting at an art show, are you gonna have it like in the dark on the floor, or are you gonna have it on the wall with a light over it, making it look perfect? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like treat all your art that same way.
Yeah,
just because.
And I think it also conveys a certain amount of respect for the person who's taking time to look at your art, whether that's an art director or a fan, or like whatever it is. When they feel like you've exuded the hospitality necessary to say, I'm going to present this to you in the best possible way so that you have a great experience. I mean, that's entertainment.
Yeah. I mean, if you do like a sewer grate in Substance Designer, you're kind of like, cool, you did the sewer grate. But if you present the sewer grate to me and you have some like quick Megascan assets around it, and it's actually in a scene, you've just convinced me that no matter what happens, that will work. And because it's already in something, even though your camera's right on it and there's really nothing existing outside of it except a couple like kit bash props that you put, you're telling me that this does work in a real scenario.
Totally.
And so I don't even think twice about approving it. But when I just see it on its own in a screen grab in another program without any lighting or anything, I'm like, does that work? I think it does. Just don't put any doubt in the head. Just like really put the nail in the coffin. Be like, see how stunning that looks. That's how it'll look if you put it in the game. Use my art. Okay.
Yeah, totally. Well, and it might sound silly, but you're giving that sewer grate a story too, right? Like it has a purpose now.
I tell somewhere. That's the biggest feedback that I always give to students. Like if you have like a sword or you have like a character, they just show the sword or the character, and it's just to present it. I'm like, think about a little bit like what that sword has gone through. Did that sword just go into battle?
Yeah.
Did they just walk through snow? Are they so tired that the character doesn't have a place to put their sword, so they're dragging the sword in the snow the whole time, and now like the blade is kind of like dull? Like when you once you kind of build out your assets, you have to build a story in every situation. Every screenshot should tell a story, always. And so that means every material should tell a story, always, no exceptions, right? And so you need to be able to present it in that way, and it's going to make your art better, because you're all of a sudden you're going to have like some wear on the shoes and snow coming up, and this pure blade is now going to have like something more interesting. That's another layer on it that kind of tells a story. And it's if an artist, when you see somebody's art, if you can like be like, give me more of that, like that's a good thing. That's what you want to do in every scenario.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I could nerd out on that subject all day. I think we got time for one more question, because I want to respect your time, and I know we're in the middle of your day. But after you learn how to texture, does it change your work for modeling? For example, texturing some details rather than modeling them. I guess we're talking about the balance between
100%.
What should I do in texture, and what'd you say?
100% back and forth. It really depends on your textile density, can you have unique unwraps? Do you have to do tiling, which all depends on how big your asset is and what your texture resolution limitations are. And also the way that UV is completely dictated by the way that you're applying textures. Are you using triplanar? Are you using UV mapping? Are you using unique UV mapping? Like all of these come into it. And it really depends on what your end goal is. And the approach to that end goal is going to change all those things. It's going to completely change your model, and also the way that you model, depending on what the if I'm like doing a cinematic thing, I'm probably going to have like a subdivided model for a cinematic in Unreal. If I'm the famous Star Citizen kind of beveled edges, weighted normal stuff in Star Citizen. Or if you're probably going on a lower end console, you're going to be triangulating everything and having like normals to try to work with your edges. It all depends on your target and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Forrest, again, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, thanks.
I mean, like I said, I could nerd out all day, but we do have to bring this stream in for a landing. But I will say, guys, feel free to stick around after we say goodbye to Forrest and thank you. I'm going to be just sharing a brief presentation about some of the different careers in the industry and how Gnomon trains artists for those careers. And during that time as well, you can feel free to engage with my colleague Xander from admissions in the chat if you've got questions about Gnomon or about anything that I'm talking about. But before we do that, let's just all give our thanks to Forrest. Thanks for spending some time with us today, and we look forward to seeing more stuff hit the public from Star Citizen and Squadron 42.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it. Have a great day, huh?
You too. All right. Bye-bye. Well, guys, I'm going to take about the next 15 minutes and go through some of what I talked about. We're going to talk about the industry. We're going to talk about Gnomon and Gnomon's programs for anybody who is interested. And my colleague, Xander, who's one of our admissions advisors, and our advisors are more like coaches. They actually coach people in their portfolios. They help them get their portfolio ready before they apply to a school. Please feel free to drop some questions for Xander in the chat. He'd be happy to share links with you to tell you how to get in touch. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly here. There we go. I'm just going to make a couple of adjustments. Excellent. So Gnomon. Gnomon is essentially a 3D art school. Oh, excuse me. Let me just bump past that. There we go. We're a 3D art school located in Hollywood, California. And we are making artists industry ready. In other words, we are training people with all the skill sets that they're going to need to go out and start a career in the digital production pipeline, whether you're working creating things for games, for film, for television, for commercials. We are preparing people for those careers. So we started back in 1997 by an industry artist by the name of Alex Alvarez. Who is Gnomon's president and founder to this day. Alex is still very involved with the school. And he started Gnomon as a place where industry artists could come and learn how to do these things. Because at that time in 1997, this is a relatively new skill set. And there was a high demand from the industry for artists who could do this, but there were very few artists that could. So he started up Gnomon with just one lab as a place where industry artists could come and train. And because the demand was so high for that skill set, we rapidly just blew up into being a full-blown college overnight. What you see on the screen here are some of the awards that we've won recently. And I won't go through all these, but this represents, for example, ranking #1 with the Rookies, which is an international competition that schools around the world like ours compete in. We also have been awarded School of Excellence by our own college accreditors. Which is a very good reflection on us as an educational institution. And we also have some great awards showing that our students who have needed to take out loans to pay for their education are actually paying off their loans quite quickly. So why am I telling you all this? I'm basically trying to tell you that we've been around for nearly 25 years, and we're very good at what we do. And because of that, our graduates have gone on to work on amazing projects. So this is just a sampling of some recent projects that have all had Gnomon alumni contributing to them. And then these are some of the studios out there that you might be familiar with who regularly hire Gnomon graduates. You can see Cloud Imperium right up there in the upper right-hand corner is where Forrest works. But, this is only just a small portion of the studios out there that are hiring. These are the ones that are a little bit more well-known by the general public. but you'll see across the top there, one of the most important things about Gnomon and about our mission is 97% industry placement. The whole point, the whole purpose of having a school, having a full-time program, a 4-year college degree in this area is to prepare people for careers. We do not want to just give knowledge to someone and then say, now you go figure out how to turn that into a job. Our whole mission is we want to prepare you for the industry, and we want to make sure that you can go out there and get that first job and start your career. So 97%, that was in 2019. It's also really good to know that in 2020, during a pandemic year with everything that was going on, still 94% of our graduates were placed in the industry. What does that percentage mean? That means that that's the percentage of our graduates from our full-time program who got a job in studio doing what they trained to do at Gnomon within just 6 months of finishing our program. And that is our mission. That is what we want to accomplish for our students and for the industry. So what are these students learning? What have these graduates learned while they've been at Gnomon? In just one term, you can sum it all up as digital production. Now, what digital production is really a bunch of really important skill sets that relate to a pipeline for creating films and for games. These are things like computer-based visual effects, character and creature design, digital sculpting, character and creature animation, environment design, lighting and rendering, map painting and compositing, game asset creation, game engines, production workflows, and world building. Now, all of those skills translate into the following careers. So every one of the titles you see on the screen right here, these are unique career paths unto themselves within the digital production pipeline. And there is a wide range of types of jobs. This is something that Forrest and I were talking about earlier in the stream, is if you want to be an artist, say you like doing 3D modeling, or you like doing animation, or you like texturing lighting, and you want to work in games, or you want to work in films, doesn't mean that there's only one job or department for you to choose from. There is a wide variety of jobs out there. And we are training people for all of these at Gnomon. So I would like to highlight just 4 of these positions. And each one of these 4 is very different from the next, to kind of give you an idea of the diversity of roles that are available to artists in the industry. So the first is character artists. And character artists do exactly what the name implies. They are responsible for creating the 3D character or creature that is exactly what the audience is going to be seeing on screen or interacting with in a game. Now, this artist right here is using a piece of software called ZBrush, which is perfect for making anything that is organic in shape. And that's because it allows you to use traditional clay sculpting techniques with a 3D model. It's essentially working with digital 3D clay. This is a great job for artists that enjoy drawing characters and creatures. In fact, you can even see the artist's sketch up there in the left-hand corner right here as they're using the software. They're referencing their own drawing to bring this character to life. So if that kind of stuff is of interest to you, this could be a great career for you in either films or games. Next up are effects artists. And I like to affectionately say that effects artists basically get to sit in front of their computer blowing things up all day. Their job is to take a lot of these beautifully crafted models, like this space station here, for example, and destroy it. Because if the scene in the film or in the game says, hey, this thing's got to blow up, somebody has got to do that and make it look great. This is a form of 3D animation, but it is not like going in and animating a character where you can animate it by hand, because there are so many millions and millions of moving pieces in a scene like this. These artists are using special software that are able to simulate physics, real physical world forces and properties, whether that's simulating fire or water, or an object of a particular mass and velocity exploding while it orbits the Earth. You name it, these artists are the wizards that are figuring out how to make that look real, and also to make it tell a story when it's on screen. So if doing that kind of stuff is of interest to you, this is a whole job that you can do and build a career on. The third example is what a compositor does. The compositor is almost at the very end of the pipeline, and they're the person that brings everything together. So, for example, for this film right here, they didn't make all of the different digital models of the boats in the background and the actors filmed in front of green screens. They didn't do that themselves, but they're the one that fit it all together into the final scene. So here you've got these tennis courts that are 3D models. The tennis players are actors in front of green screens. The buildings and props in the foreground are 3D models with texturing on them and lighting. More actors are inserted, a final lighting pass is done, and you wind up with a great shot like this. This is from the film Wolf of Wall Street. And guys, the majority of shots that we see like this in television and in commercials, even though it looks like it could just be 100% real world location, most of the time it is not. And that is because directors can save money and time by having a studio create these 3D models for the scene and having a compositor bring it all together so that no one knows the difference. So I'm saying all that to say that if you like, solving the puzzle and you like putting it all together and you like kind of pulling off that magic trick of, hey, this is 100% real, this is an awesome job. And there's a massive demand in the industry for compositors. Now, the last example that I want to show is a form of 3D animation and 3D modeling, but it's different in the sense that this is essentially making a moving storyboard for a movie. Traditional storyboards are hand-drawn images that are arranged sequentially, kind of like a comic book, that communicate what happens in each scene of a movie. But here you see, as what is being done for most major films today, is more simplified models being used in animation to convey a moving storyboard. Now, these are 3D modelers and animators who get to work very closely with the director and the cinematographer. They get to hear how the story is going to be told. And then the director says, now just go make a simple version of this. Get everything that needs to happen in the scene in there. Move the camera, make the camera pan in this way. Let's use this kind of lens on the camera and so forth. So if you want to work in 3D and you want to do 3D animation, but you also are a storyteller and you're kind of a big picture thinker, and you would rather, create an entire film like this than maybe just spend months and months only working on a portion of it, this could be a great role for you. I like to say that these are kind of like animators trapped in a director's body. It's a little bit of kind of both of those skill sets, and it's a fantastic role, and also a role that is in very high demand in the industry today. So with those examples in mind, I want to talk very briefly about Gnomon's academic offerings. This is how we are training artists to do these things. So here you can see a bird's eye perspective of everything that Gnomon offers. In the upper left-hand corner, we have a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in digital production. So that is a fully accredited 4-year college degree program where you learn to do these things. Just next to it on the top row, you see a certificate program, which is a 2-year program. It's more intensive. It's a heavier course load. It's a little bit more akin to a master's level of study. And then on the bottom row, you'll see we have a foundation in art and design, and this is intended to help you build your portfolio at Gnomon. The 2 full-time programs at the top do require a portfolio submission in order to be admitted into the program, but the foundation is something you don't have to submit a portfolio for. It's something you talk with admissions about and enroll in, and it will teach you all the skills you need to build an effective portfolio. And lastly, well over 70 of the classes in our full-time programs are also available as individual classes. So taking a closer look at the Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, this is a fully accredited college program, which means that financial aid is available. All the things that you would want to look into to help you pay for your tuition, those are going to be available. It is full-time and it's on our campus. And we're very happy that we are physically back on the Gnomon campus again. We're 100% open, and our incoming fall class was able to come on campus into our labs and start into their programs there. This is essentially a training in what we call a 3D generalist skill set. So in the 4 years that you're in this college degree program, you will be learning all of the different jobs in the pipeline. Kind of like what Forrest was talking about earlier, is having that broad understanding of how everything works. And then on top of that knowledge, you get to build the areas that you're particularly interested in working in. And the ways that you can do that are you can choose from one of 2 optional concentrations. One would be game art. So that is, if you want to do what Forrest is doing in the gaming industry in a studio like Cloud Imperium, you'll learn all of the digital production pipeline as it specifically applies to working within game engines. The other concentration that you can choose from is our VFX concentration, which opens up some of the more advanced VFX classes that were previously only available in the 2-year program, brings those into the 4-year program for you so you can build skills in that area. Additionally, you do not have to choose one of these concentrations, because you also get to pick out 4 electives in your last 4 terms in the program, which lets you zero in on the skill set that you really want to be hired for when you go out there and start working in the industry, whether that's texturing and shading, modeling, compositing, visual effects, character art, and so forth. So you get to build that broad generalist understanding and then build extra skills on top. And it's that combination of those 2 things that makes our graduates so desirable in studios. It's the reason why well over 50 studios come to the Gnomon campus just to look at Gnomon student artwork as we have graduating classes finishing, because they're looking to hire our students. The admissions for the full-time program at Gnomon is 4 times out of the year. So you don't have to just apply in the fall, but you can apply in the fall, the winter, the spring, and the summer. And the majority of our students choose to stay on and not take a summer break, but stay in the program for every summer term that they're there, which allows them to finish in 3 years rather than 4. The other full-time program that I'll mention is our certificate program. And as I said, this is more advanced. This is typically utilized by students who may already have a degree from another college and are wanting to come into a more intensive, almost like Navy SEALs type training in digital production to really hone those skills and launch out and start their career. You will get that generalist education, but you also get to choose from one of 5 areas of study, whether that would be modeling and texturing or animation, visual effects, so forth. That also is a tremendous option for those looking to go into a full-time program and launch into a career. Next up, I'll talk briefly about our foundation in art and design. As I said, this is a portfolio building course that you can take at Gnomon. And that's because we recognize there are people out there that really want to do this work, that want to go to Gnomon, but may have not had the opportunity yet to learn some of the necessary foundational art skills to have an admissible portfolio when you apply to the full-time programs. And what this is it's a 1-year course that you don't have to stay in for the entire year, but it gets you into classes like figure drawing, costume to figure drawing, perspective, color and light theory. You get into some great entertainment design classes like character and creature design, vehicles, mechs, environments, and so forth. So this is a course that as you're going through it, you're learning these things and preparing portfolio pieces that you then can use to apply to the full-time program. As you're doing this, you can also be in communication with our admissions team to find out when they feel that you're ready then to turn and apply to those programs as well. It's also a great course to go through if you're looking to go to an art school that does not teach what Gnomon teaches and go for a different kind of an art degree. These are still really important skills that you're going to need to be able to put in your portfolio no matter what art education you're headed towards. So lastly, the individual classes at Gnomon, these are classes that you can choose from a la carte. It's available to any adult student, does not require a portfolio application. These are single classes that meet once a week for 10 weeks, and each class is 3 hours long. And these are standalone courses that cover almost the entire gamut of what Gnomon teaches. It's a great way if you are already a working professional or you are going to another school full-time and you're looking to pick up a night class or a weekend class to start learning these things. It's a great option. And it's also a great way to find out what it's like to be a student at Gnomon before attending Gnomon. So if you're interested in individual classes, you can also talk to admissions about that. They would be happy to help guide you to what would be the best choice for you, depending on where you are currently at. And with that, I want to talk about our admissions advisors. In fact, we've got Xander right there in the shot, who's there in the chat talking with you guys. This is our admissions team. And each one of these admissions advisors are more like coaches. One of the things that's very different about Gnomon from other art schools is our admissions team. These are not the people that you wait to talk to until you're going to apply and they just let you know whether you get in or not. These are the first people you want to talk to at Gnomon. Each one of them is an accomplished artist in their own right. And they're there to coach you, to help you with questions, to help you with the application process. And most importantly, before you apply, they will take the time to look at your artwork and help you build your portfolio. They will help you to know what Gnomon is looking for. What are some of the projects and pieces that you've done that would be very strong portfolio pieces? What are some areas that you might still need to develop or some projects that you might need to include? And they do this on an individual basis with every applicant to the school. In fact, before you apply, they offer this coaching for free. So if that's something that is of interest to you, I would definitely encourage you to utilize the link that Xander is dropping in the chat to get in touch with admissions. You also can schedule a private tour of the school. We're doing limited tours at this time, and admissions would be happy to let you know how to get access to that as well. And lastly, I'll invite you guys. I already mentioned campus. We'd love to have you come out and take a tour. But also, we are constantly doing events and live streams just like this. Hopefully soon we'll be able to start having live events on campus again. All Gnomon events are free to the public. Our gallery shows, gallery openings, all of that is something that you can be a part of, because we want to build a community for all interested people at Gnomon. We want to be a place that you can come to and learn, whether you are in the full-time program or not. And so I'd advise you to follow us on social media to find out more events that are coming up in the future. Here's a sampling of some of the kinds of events we've done in the past. We'll be continuing to have more instructor spotlights just like this. And we also have a regular Wednesday art jam with Gnomon's Chief Creative Officer, Josh Herman, and Gnomon's founder and president, Alex Alvarez. And Josh and Alex have both completed recently the Unreal Fellowship, which means they've learned how to use Unreal Engine. They both created a short animated sequence, short film in Unreal, and they have presented that, and now they're doing these art jams on Wednesdays, so you can kind of see their process and their modeling and bringing stuff into Unreal and so forth. So if you're looking for a pretty casual hang where you can watch them do what they're doing, you can ask questions, maybe while you're working on your own art as well, that is going to be every Wednesday from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific time on the all the streaming platforms that Gnomon streams on, Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. So with that, everyone, I want to thank you for being here today. It's been my pleasure to be able to host Forrest and be able to speak with him today, as well as inform you guys. And I just encourage you to stay safe, stay creative, and we hope to see you back here on the stream very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.